Before we get into the episode, please could you do me a favour and hit the follow or subscribe button wherever you're listening to the podcast. You'll be actively helping our community to grow and for us to reach more people, and it allows us to get great new guests on for future episodes.
Art versus the algorithm with Will Preisner.
Welcome to episode 10 of Art versus the Algorithm. I'm your host, Will Preisner, and in this episode I'm joined by Dave McEllistrum, a photographer celebrated for his emotionally charged conceptual art nudes and his evocative use of light and colour. In our conversation, Dave shares his journey from landscape photography to developing a richly personal style specialising in art nude photography that draws inspiration from painterly and cinematic influences. We'll uncover how he crafts images that go far beyond aesthetics, exploring themes of introspection, authenticity, and the stories that unfold within each frame. Together, we discuss the challenges and dynamics of working with top art models, the importance of meaningful locations, and Dave's approach to creating striking visual narratives. You'll hear his perspective on composition, creative evolution, and navigating the world of art and self-expression in the age of social media. Also, by listening to this episode, you'll discover practical insights and inspiration for infusing deeper emotion and genuine storytelling into your own creative work. A final note before we begin: the podcast Instagram has now moved and is available at Will Preisner, my name, alongside my photography work. There's a link in the episode description to that Instagram, and the other Instagram no longer works, so don't follow the old one. Follow that one. So, without further ado, let's get on to episode 10 with Dave McEllistrum. Can you tell me who you are and describe the artwork that you produce?
Yeah, I took a darkroom class around the year 2000, but that was about 4 months, and that was the end of photography. And then I was too stressed at work and needed a hobby. And in around 2011, I took up landscape photography and just did that for 7 years. If there was a person in the photo, it wasn't right. It wasn't a landscape photo. So I traveled a lot for that. All my vacation was landscape photography. And in about 2018, I was getting fat and I was having problems with my hip and my knee. And I thought, well, maybe landscape photography isn't as good as it used to be. The other thing, it was exciting. I loved being outside. I loved taking those photos. But when I first started in 2011, my first trip was, man, I've got 500 great photos, which I really had none. But I thought I had 500 great photos. So 2018, I think I took a trip to Death Valley. And my goal at that trip was to have 3 portfolio-worthy images in a week. So it was getting a little less exciting. And I thought, maybe mix this up, and took a couple of portrait courses, workshops. And initially I was looking for a certain style. I like dark and moody images, dark backgrounds. And so I was looking for that style and somebody that could teach that style. So I was looking on the internet, 3 or 4 months. Didn't mention it to my wife. We were out for dinner one day and I mentioned it to her, what I was trying to do and what I was thinking. And basically she said, "You're an idiot. There's a guy in town here that does exactly that and does teaching as well." So I did a portrait workshop in 2019 or 18, I think, and did my first shoot in 2020. And since then, it's mostly been art nudes or portraits around art nudes.
What is it that drew you to photography specifically?
I've always been drawn. I have no creative background. I was decent in school and I played every sport there was, and so have a competitive sports background, but no artistic background at all until I took up photography. I did have posters on my wall, what you might expect a teenage boy might have as a teenager, but some of those were Ansel Adams posters. Mm-hmm. So I'd always had a love of black and white imagery. And so that's something that just carried through me as an adult. And in 2011, thought, well, I love hiking, love photography, or love the idea of photography. And so two kind of came together and was able to marry the two and did that for 7 or 8 years.
Your photography can be quite conceptual at times. And I'm wondering what the process you have and that you go through to develop and plan your ideas is, and what role experimentation plays within this on the shoot or during the planning process.
I think it's an evolution in the landscape world and the portraits I was doing in workshops. It was just trying to take a photo that looked good. And I think I kind of got not bored, but I wanted more out of the photography than that. So getting into the art nude world, I think there was a couple reasons. One, I grew up in a family that didn't really sexualize nudity. Nudity was normalized and not sexualized. He had some paintings and sculpture and things, and he liked glamour nudes and stuff like that too. But he passed away when he was 50 of a pretty rare disease. And in 2020, I was 50 when I started. So it was kind of a tribute to him to some extent. But I know I didn't want to, at the time at least, to do a Playboy style, or I wanted to do something that had some meaning. And both of my daughters, my wife, myself, we've all dealt with some kind of mental health struggle over the past 5-10 years. And so a lot of my work initially was trying to communicate the isolation, disconnectedness, emptiness, sadness, keep going with adjectives, of mental health struggle. And was really pretty pure to that for the first 3 or 4 years of shooting until about a year and a half ago. The first shot I ever did on my own is a composite of the model nude on a couch and clothed on a chair, trying to tell the story of real self versus the self that you present to others. So clothes being the self you present to others, and naked and nude being the real self. And so nudity really took on that connotation for me right away, in terms of pure nudity was real self, vulnerability, no mask. And so my first shot was very conceptual. And I think for the next 7, 8, 9, 10 shoots, I was going for that one shot, even though I got a lot more. And I'm drawn to that type of photography as well. So the work of Gregory Crewdson and Erwin Olaf, they have a more conceptual feeling to a lot of their work. And so I was following that, and I wanted to kind of do something in the same vein. And that's still the work that I really connect with, is something that is telling a story, even if it's vague or it's bringing out emotion or mood. Pretty nice photos, I don't connect with that. So.
Yeah, I find that very relatable, what you're saying there, especially with not being able to connect with just pretty nice photos. I mean, I think that's why I've often looked at your work and felt inspired by it, because I see that there's a deeper meaning to it, which I definitely want to touch on more a little later in the conversation. But I also noticed, just in terms of like technique and style, your use of light and dark feels quite painterly, almost like a Rembrandt painting. Where do you find the stylistic inspiration for your work, and what kind of guides that?
Yeah, it's the type of, when I first started I didn't explicitly try to develop a style per se, but I had some processing background from landscapes, and that's all about dealing with light. And so I had some background with that. Although if you saw my work from 2011, 2012, 2013, you wouldn't want to put it on your wall, at least. It was that bad from a processing perspective. So I spent a lot of time at the processing, and I think I was really drawn to a painterly style of photography. You know, Hemi Wout-Binnendijk, she's a Dutch photographer that uses Phase 1 system, and her work is just beautifully painterly. And so there was some inspirations there. And then I didn't used to be a big art gallery person, but the travel I've done in the last number of years, whatever big city I'm in, I'm going to their art gallery and drawn to the work where light plays a big role. So Caravaggio, Vermeer, Hopper, 3 different styles, but all portraying light in an interesting way. And so I think that those are my inspirations for kind of that light and dark. And it also kind of ties in with the themes that I'm working with too, in terms of lightness and darkness in life. So
the references that you just made there I'm familiar with, because a lot of cinematographers use those painters as references. And that's one thing that came to mind. I mean, I'm a cinematographer, that's my job. And looking at your work, it feels like it's almost like a cinematographer's style of photography. The light and dark and the storytelling. And it feels like you're almost on the filmmaking edge of photography when I'm looking at it.
Well, that's great, because I'm really drawn to that. My wife gets a little upset when we're out seeing a movie, which happens less these days with COVID and stuff like that having happened, but where I'm commenting in her about the lighting, or how did they do that lighting effect in the movie? Well, she's trying to watch a movie. So I am drawn to cinematography as well. And that would be an inspiration, maybe not explicitly particular cinematographers, although I'm familiar with a few, but just watching movies and seeing how they deal with them. particularly natural light shooters, because most of my work is natural light.
And I also noticed as well that your compositions and use of color is also quite remarkable. Like, how did you learn and hone these abilities to compose and consider color in your images and things like this?
COVID lockdowns was the big thing that happened. So I really liked my black and white landscapes better than my color landscapes in general. I've struggled a little bit with black and white since I've changed to the Fuji GFX. It's just a different file to deal with from a black and white perspective, particularly. I believe it's set up better for painterly color work. When I had a whole bunch of time in COVID lockdowns, I really spent most of it trying to kind of look at free and paid resources online for processing and really trying to make it feel right. I was a partner in a CPA firm dealing with taxes and financial statements and stuff like that. So I had a reasonably technical job, but I have zero interest in the technical aspects of photography. Embarrassingly, I can't really even use my camera. If I have to go into the menu system, I just know how to set ISO, and it's a little embarrassing. But from an artistic perspective, everything I'm looking at is just trying to make it feel right. And one of the things that I did both in landscapes and people work, I looked at a lot of other images and tried to see what I liked and tried to build a visual library of work that I liked. And then it just becomes, does it feel right? And color is one of those things. And I've never really thought I was great in color, but I get that comment a fair bit. So it must be, I'm almost never happy with the final product for some reason. But
from a color perspective?
Well, color or tones or some. It's interesting. I'm in business. I'm a big picture kind of guy, analytical big picture person, but I'm becoming a perfectionist when it comes to photography. So I think it also is a good thing. It drives you to do better and do more and stuff like that. So
I find color one of the hardest concepts to grasp. And even if I'm happy on one day, the next day I can be completely unhappy, or I can be fine for a few weeks and then look at it in a year and I just hate it. I feel like my perception of it is changing, and so therefore my opinion moves with it.
Yeah, that happens to me every couple of weeks that I go back and forth on. It depends on the light that I'm looking at it in and thinking, why is that so bright? I didn't want it that bright. And what device I'm looking at it on and stuff like that. So, but some endure and some I like in the long term. So that's a good thing.
That's good. I mean, the thing is, how I look at your work, it feels consistent and it has a look. Not that it's all the same, but you know that there's a consistency to it that seems like it's controlled. And so, to me, it's surprising that you would not necessarily feel that.
Yeah, the workflow is consistent. That's the one thing that the COVID lockdown did, was allow me the time to really create a workflow for my processing. Mm-hmm. And I don't use everything the same every time, but I basically use the same techniques and the same thing on every file. So that gives it presumably a consistent look to it. I had a shoot right before, I think it was maybe in August of 2020, a couple month COVID lockdown. And I had 2 3-hour shoots in one day. And from that, I processed, I think, 180 images. From 6 hours of shooting, which now, if it was 6 hours of shooting, it might be 20 images or 18 images or something like that. But I had the time and I had nothing else to do, and you couldn't go anywhere. And so kind of developed that workflow.
And did you feel like that was the greatest point of learning?
I think so, because it was so concentrated. Because my business life is busy. And so unless I'm on vacation, where I'm pretty good at just shutting everything else out and focusing on the vacation, there's always things that are intruding in the evening and stuff like that. So it allowed me to kind of separate from that world. So it was good.
You shoot in some very impressive locations, like both interiors and exteriors. What are you looking for when you're searching for locations for your images?
I'm generally looking something that would look good in a painterly style color image. So I'm doing a lot of events where mostly put on by models that are renting a French chateau, or last year I was in 3 different Latvian manors, which were unbelievable interiors. And I have all these ideas to create conceptual shots in space and plan it and light it. But in the end, I'm too lazy. And so going to these places and reacting to the space and the light and the models, and I'm really choosing events because of the models and the space combined. In the end, the model is key. If the model whatever I do and whatever the space does, if the model doesn't emote in the mood that we're going for, then it's really the model that makes the shot. But everything else comes together to set the mood and emotion.
And so you're creating most of your work through the photography events that run?
Yeah, events or local shooting here as well. There's some decent locations here in Toronto. And I've had the fortune, I've been to, not events, but I've been to the UK 4 times in the last 5 years. But as I said, the locations are important, but the models are the most important.
I've obviously seen you've worked with some quite top international art models whose work I see regularly in various places. What qualities are best in a model that you work with? What would you look for?
Yeah, for me, primary is the ability to create mood and emotion and story with their posing, both body-wise and facially, and particularly facially. I don't have a lot of shots that are just body shots, that there's no face and there's no face facing camera in some way, or at least side of the face. So the ability to have the versatility to use their body and face in a way that creates emotion really is key. I'm drawn to facial beauty as well, but that doesn't necessarily have things to do with the themes that I'm shooting. But in a certain way, it does. I guess one of the shooting about mental health struggle, but also I've got some feedback that the cleanness of my processing and the beauty of the models and the location is kind of contra to the story I'm trying to tell. But I counter that with part of the thought process is everything else can be idyllic or seemingly idyllic in someone's life, but that doesn't mean that there won't be mental health struggles present. So
definitely not. And you mentioned that your models are often like they look deep in thought, and I mean from my perspective as well, like reflecting and seem emotionally vulnerable. How do you go about specifically directing the models like this?
I think a lot of it's creating a relationship and not just getting right to the shoot, but having at least some conversation. A lot of the models I'm working with, I now have worked with before at this point. So, and even at events where the time is constrained, we might have an hour twice in an event to shoot one model. I'm taking 10 or 15 minutes out of the first shoot and just talking about my work and what they like in their work. And my direction is never specific, other than to the mood and story and emotion that I'm trying to tell with the image. And then I'm relying on them, however they want to interpret that in their own way. And so it actually, I think that style a lot of times makes it better than I initially conceived it, because their interpretation of it makes it even better than what I initially thought it would be. So that style has worked well for me and what I'm trying to produce. So.
It almost, again, relating to filmmaking, it almost sounds like the style of how a director works with an actor.
Yeah, I haven't thought about it that way because I've never done any video, but it's good for me to hear that, because maybe I should pay attention to filmmaking a little more to try to get some of the things that I want. So the one thing I found that I didn't realize when I started shooting is that the models that I'm working with almost across the board are talented people, not just talented models, but they're business people, academics, creatives, lots of great photographers and painters and people that make their own clothes. And I just didn't realize that the quality of people that I would get the chance to work with as models would be as high as it is. And so that's something that the end image is the most important to me, but it's been really gratifying to have, from an experiential perspective, to work with people that are that interesting and talented in their own right. So.
And just keeping on the note of models and their unique qualities, I've noticed some of the poses in your photos I find to be very unique, like creative, expressive, and look physically challenging as well. Do these poses come about as a result of some of that direction you just mentioned, or do you have an idea of the poses that you want to create? Because some of them seem like almost like contorting the bodies at times.
Yeah, it's a bit of both. I research models a lot if I haven't worked with them, in terms of looking at what work they've done and who they've worked with and what their style is, and try to come up with a conclusion of what do they do particularly well. And I try to utilize that. I've got a shot of a model that's basically doing a handstand on the edge of a couch and falling into the couch. And I know she can do that kind of work from the research that I've done and having shot her once before and stuff. So in that case, I would have brought a vague idea of doing something different, and then she would have made it concrete with what she was comfortable with. So it's really a bit of both. Sometimes it's all the model bringing in their interpretation of the mood or the story. Sometimes I have an idea of what they may be able to do. And one of my series is about a sense of disconnection. Those poses help get that concept across in terms of not being in the place in a normal way.
You may have mentioned these in some of the projects that you've referenced already, and forgive my pronunciation of this if it's incorrect, but your projects Emote and Aura, is that?
I'm not even sure how to pronounce it. I just know what it means. And it basically is true self and masked self.
Yeah, I Googled during my research to try and get an idea of what that was. But that project's in dissonance. I've noticed that you obviously juxtapose multiple models, sometimes the same model I'm guessing.
Yeah, that Omote and Aura is all the same model. All of those images are the same model, composited once nude and once clothed. Dissonance is usually 2 or 3 different models. And there, the theme is isolation, even with others, often. A sense of kind of being in your own world and introspective, even in a group or around a group.
Are there any specific challenges that come from working in a group with multiple models that you need to consider when approaching it?
Usually the models are great together, and they're used to shooting group or duo shots differently than I shoot a lot of the time. They're used to being in closer proximity often. So I think they like the challenge of that, and they like the conceptual ideas of it. But particularly I found with 3 or 4 models, to get everybody on in the same image takes some time. And the real opportunities where it's cost effective to shoot those are at events. And so you don't have much time. You might have 15 minutes or half an hour or 45 minutes to shoot those. But I've been pretty lucky working with talented people, and I've got a lot of great shots out of that. They've executed the concept exactly like I would have hoped. So if you looked through the raws of that shoot, there's probably 5 where 2 or 3 of the 4 are kind of on what you'd want. And so you probably get 5 or 6 ones that don't work for everyone that does. So that's the biggest challenge.
It's a time versus attention sort of challenge.
Yeah, and just for everybody to bring the presence that the concept demands to it. So you'll see images where 2 of the 3 models have great presence in their body language and in their face, and one is kind of not in that image, and then the next one, she's fine, and the other 2 aren't right. And so it's just a matter of trying to notice that and going through the work before you finalize the set and making sure that you've got the shot that you were hoping for. So I've gotten a lot better at making sure I've actually got it if I'm going to spend the time doing that kind of stuff. So
is that through checking back on the back of the camera?
Yeah. I'm never using a computer when I'm shooting. So I'm always hand holding in just the back of the camera. It all gets back to me being lazy, Will. It's lights and tripods, and it all takes extra effort. So I just want to get out there and shoot. So
yeah, I know what you mean. Tell me about it. I'm a little bit on the lazy side too. I appreciate hand holding more, and also just to be able to react. So, but your images look so well composed, and especially seeing so many of your images side by side, I was like, it feels like the shot on a tripod.
The composite ones were because I needed it for the composite. Everything else is just handheld. I shoot a lot at ISO 800, even ISO 1600, because of the low light and it's a challenge dealing with natural light that you get bounces off the floor that you've got to deal with in post-processing, and light coming from different directions, color casts that last year it was a great room, but it was yellow. And so there's a yellow color cast on everything in the room. And so dealing with the post-processing of the natural light images, the shooting of it's easy, but the post-processing I think is actually more involved than shooting with controlled lighting, because you can get exactly what you want in the lighting if you're controlling it.
Yeah. And with regards to the post-processing, how much are you concerned about the kind of calibration of your monitor or anything like that?
I was at one point, but I haven't calibrated it in probably 2 years. So you get to see it on different devices, see it on my phone, see it on an iPad, see it on the computer. So I know that on my computer, it'll appear a little more magenta probably than it will on my iPad and iPhone, but you just learn to deal with it. So it might be easier to get the thing out of the drawer and put it on the screen and calibrate it, but it seems to be working what I'm doing. So
Yeah. I mean, and there's such a difference between the multiple devices you put it on. I've found that whenever I've bothered to calibrate and get something I'm happy with, and then I look somewhere else, it's just disheartening that I've spent so much effort considering that.
Yeah, my processing in general, people don't believe. When they see me process, they don't believe that that's the way I process. I'm either basically sitting on a couch or a chair or laying on a couch or a chair, just using the trackpad of my MacBook and the MacBook screen to process everything. So I needed a way to do it where I was in the same room as my wife and didn't have to go to a table and a monitor and stuff like that. Otherwise, I would never see her. So I'm able to do it kind of anywhere. Sitting in a chair, I can, at the airport, it's all good. So
I imagine at the airport it's difficult, though, with the content of your photos involving art nude.
Yeah, you got to find a corner seat at the restaurant or the cafe or the airport. So I usually do one or two sets of clothed work with most shoots that I do. So I have some of that material for airplanes and stuff like that if I'm processing. So.
Yeah.
But, yeah, the art nudes are a little difficult.
Yeah, I've often been in airports and wished I could do my work and not really been able to or not thought to. But the quiet corner part, I'm going to maybe try and keep my eyes open for it. I always feel like it's such a vast space with hundreds of thousands of people in every direction. I was like, I don't know how this. And I also was with a photographer once, wasn't retouching art nude, but was just retouching. And a member of the public came up to her and just expressed their displeasure that they were retouching a photo. They weren't modifying the body or anything. But it was just sort of like this is wrong that you're doing this. This was quite a few years ago. We were like shocked that someone would just take time out of the day to come and do that.
Especially when their phone does the processing for them. So it's, I don't know if they realize that, but yeah.
This might have been before that.
Yeah. At an airport, I'll even go to a different gate, like an empty gate, if I want to process an art nude. So there's nobody there.
This is great advice.
Enjoying the show? Visit our website at artvsalgorithm.com to explore episode blogs, transcripts, and so much more. Don't forget to follow us on Instagram and TikTok at Will Preisner. And while you're listening, let us know what you think of this episode by leaving a review on your favourite podcast app.
On that topic as well, Sam Barton, who's one of your friends, I believe, he sort of had put us in touch for this podcast, and he was a guest on the podcast previously. He directed me towards a blog post that he wrote where he commented on your unique photo editing position. And I'm just going to quote him. He said, Dave starts by using the trackpad only on his laptop. He holds the laptop close to his chest and edits at what must be 45 degrees to his face. His fingers on the trackpad like a DJ fading in the next track. I also saw the behind the scenes photo that he took of you. So I've got an idea of the concept. It was like one hand, holding the laptop with one hand and editing with the other, which is quite impressive.
If you put enough time into anything, you can become reasonably, at least mediocre at it. So that's my theory on life in general.
It's a great skill. I'm too busy trying to make sure everything's perfect, and I'm not even getting anywhere near as close as you are. But I like the idea of being able to retouch with other people in the room. That's something I'd like to be able to get better at.
Yeah, I tried a Wacom tablet at one point in time. That was for a day and a half, I think, before I thought this is going to take me like a month and a half to really get good at this probably. So I abandoned it right away. So
that's impressive. I'm terrible with the trackpad though. I have to have like a mouse for everything else anyway. It's not my device. It's quite impressive you've managed to master that with such skill. And just to take it back a little bit, when we're talking about shooting in groups, a photographer that I chatted to a while ago once said to me, anytime you involve more than one nude model in a photo, it's hard not to have the image be kind of sexualized as you imagine their relation to one another and assume it to be sexual. But however, like obviously looking at your work, I feel like you are able to thread deeper lines between the characters in your images that kind of go far beyond that reading. I was just wondering what your thoughts on that reading is. And is it something you're aware of or try and avoid?
Yeah, sensual or sexual is a theme that I'm really going for an almost zero images of mine. That'll come across depending on who the user is, I'm sure, depending on the pose. But to me, it usually fits into a bucket of mental health struggle or kind of a hope and healing kind of theme, or a self-actualized self-confidence, not a sexualized or sensualized self-confidence, but just hey, I know who I am and forget you if you don't like that kind of confidence. And so to me, 95, maybe 98% of my work falls into one of those buckets. And not that I have anything against sensual or sexualized work, because as a consumer, I enjoy some of that work. I don't connect with it as well as the conceptual and the moods and emotions that I'm going for. That, as you said, kind of the model being introspective or isolated or alone or in their own world. I think for the first year and a half, maybe, I had no models looking at camera at all in shoots. And now with kind of that confident theme, I do that a lot more. And I branched out a little bit in the last year to try some things that hadn't been trying, just to see whether I liked it or not. And really, I don't connect to anything as well as if I could do multi-model, story-based, conceptual, cool scene shots, that would be fine by me. But I really get a lot of satisfaction out of. So.
Yeah, I'd love to see that as well. The more of that you do, the better it is for me and other people looking, I imagine.
The way that Instagram and stuff works, those never get as many likes, but I don't really care about the amount of likes. I'm creating for myself first and foremost. And it's always nice if models and other photographers that get it to like the work. But on Instagram, you got 78% of your followers are always people that just want to look at the sensuality or sexuality of the body in the image. So I believe so. And the comments that I have to delete every day or restrict every day definitely show that. So for me, it's almost never about that. I've done a little bit of work in that kind of sensual, sexualized realm in the last year, but I've found out that I don't connect with it as well as what I've been doing.
You reminded me also of a conversation that I've had recently with another photographer friend. She shoots a lot of kind of self-portrait nude work. She has done in the past, but it's always subtly covering either her chest or genitals. There's always some object or something covering, because she seems not like it's being censored. It's kind of composed that way because she thinks that if ever that is in the image, there's no way it can not be the focus of the image, which I've had many debates with her about because I disagree.
It always depends on the viewer, I think. And a lot of viewers, if there's nudity and you were raised, particularly in North America and maybe the UK, I don't know, but if you're raised to look at any nudity as sexualized or bad, then I think that's maybe going to be the reaction to nudes. But if you grew up in an environment where nudity wasn't sexualized all the time, then I think if you look at the pose, occasionally I'll get a comment on an image that says, oh, sexy. And there's nothing sexy about the pose or the image or the emotion or the mood. And so you'll always get that. But I think to people that are looking past the taboo of nudity, I would hope certainly that people would hopefully, and it's one of my goals is to get people to think about the images and actually just stop scrolling for 1 second. Even 1 second would be a win, I think, with all the doom scrolling these days. But to think about the image and what's being portrayed and what is the nudity contributing to that. My goal really is for the nudity to be secondary to the story or emotion and really to be a contributing factor, kind of playing that role of vulnerability and real self. And I think at one point, and I've got away from this now, but at one point a couple of years ago, I think I posted 50 photos in a row to Instagram that had zero clothes in them, because I was so pure to that concept that nudity was about real self. And some of those could be easily read as sensual, but some of them certainly not, I would hope. So I disagree.
Yeah, I'm pleased you do. I'll use this conversation as a backup the next time I'm having this debate because it comes up quite often. And you've mentioned the mental health side of your work, but I'm just wondering if there's anything else you can expand on with regards to how much of yourself that you would say goes into your work to create such emotive and poignant images?
Yeah, well, I think that is based on personal experience. And Both of my daughters had suffered from mental health issues as they were growing up. And when I started to deal with some things, I had some tools that I'd read about for them to be able to deal with it on my own. And it still pops up sometimes. And it's one of the reasons why I retired or semi-retired at 54 years old. I just was done with the stress of the work environment and prefer to create rather than deal with a bunch of stuff every day. So it's definitely a personal side. And one of the things that it did to me, whenever I've done a Myers-Briggs, I'm in the middle, introvert or extrovert. I'm great with a group of people, and I'm great on my own. Really, since the mental health struggles, I'm definitely better, more to the introvert side. Spending time on my own has become more important, and the imagery with showing a sense of isolation and a sense of disconnectedness. And so there is definitely personal there, but it's also observational in terms of my family and people around and stuff like that. And when I see that type of imagery from others, I have a visceral reaction to images, whether it just connects with me or it doesn't. And generally those type of images, I don't even know why, I just connect with that kind of mood and that kind of feeling. So there's a beauty in isolation and disconnectedness kind of coupled with a sense of moving forward as well.
Yeah. Do you find it to be like that sort of that expression to be therapeutic?
Certainly initially, because when I started 5 years ago, I was closer to kind of my own mental health struggles. And certainly it was being able to investigate or look at that through the lens of a camera and trying to create. It was definitely a therapeutic experience. Maybe less so now, but I still connect with it. I still processed an image this week that it had that feel to it, and I always connect with that imagery.
My own personal quest into shooting art nude photography stemmed out of my own struggles with my mental health, and it was like trying to find an expression after trying various things. And it's interesting because I spoke to a photographer painter on the podcast a few weeks ago. He was talking about melancholy in art and how powerful it is, and it really got me thinking about some of these topics and why I'm like you in a way that that's the sort of work that I connect the most with. There's a painting by Goya. It's called like The Seated Giant, I think, looking back over his shoulder, but he's hunched and it's kind of like a dark giant sitting on a ledge. And it's sort of like they think it was like his attempt to paint depression in a monster, in an animal, or a severe mental health problem. It's such a poignant image, and I found it connected with me so much. I bought a print and just had it on the wall, just because even by looking at those sorts of images, I found it to be therapeutic for me. The idea that someone created art that kind of slightly got a bit how I was feeling in my head, you know? So then go on to try and create your own work like that. It's inspiring. It's probably why I've been inspired by your work too, because I saw how much emotion and thought had gone into it. And I'm probably feeling the stuff that you're intending to put in it, like subconsciously, which is great that it's been so successful. It definitely hit me.
Well, that's great, because I'm glad it's connecting with others, because you never know, right? The comments you get on Instagram are all 3 hearts or worse.
Yeah.
And so it's nice to, you don't get there's not a lot of commentary, so it's nice to know that it connects. So.
It's really hard to kind of like put in an Instagram comment without longer conversation like we have right now, how you feel about a thing. And also I sometimes find it hard to put into words the fact it's made me feel and made me stop and think. I mean, that was what I loved about researching your website as well, because it's just a series of doing that. And I wasn't just flicking, you know, it was like, I'm going through and I'm thinking, and that's like, I'm rarely doing that. And it makes me think like, I need to do this with more photographers' work and just more artists' work in general. Because even it's not a gallery, but being on the internet on a website and taking my time, I can connect with it better. And then it's obviously informed the conversation we're having right now, which is much more valuable, I feel, than just a comment.
Yeah. Well, hopefully I can produce a lot more of that type of work. I kind of feel I'm in a no man's land right now of knee surgery. And then I had COVID, and then I had some other problems. And so I've been recovering from various things for the last 5 months. So I've not shot much. So I'm going through old work, which there is some stuff that I didn't pick up the first time that kind of fits. But I kind of feel like I'm just processing work. And they're nice images, but I really need to get back to specifically creating. If I'm intentionally creating something versus just throwing out a theme, it's so much higher hit rate in terms of things that I connect with in my own work. And so just getting out, and even if that's a 3 or 4 hour shoot and I get one of those shots that I really connect with, that's a good shoot for me. So I got to get back out hopefully in the summer here, and going to be in Europe for a couple months. So there's some nice locations. So hopefully intentionally produce in those spaces some more of that type of work. So.
How has your experience of censorship been, specifically of the human body in your work?
Well, I think fortunately or unfortunately, Instagram is kind of it's the place where people go not only daily, but hourly to look at things. So there are some other places where I have some of my work, Model Society, even on Purple Port in the UK, which are good sites, but they're not destinations. There's not as much exposure. And sometimes I question, do I really need the followers, or what is that worth? So I think if you really want to get your work seen, you're kind of stuck with Instagram right now, even though Blue Sky and some other options are emerging. But there's no consistency. It's a game. And to a certain extent, it's misogynistic. I can post things and get away with it that models can't post of themselves. I never hashtag anything and never have, but followership has been, I'm lucky my account hasn't been taken down, I think, but my experience is that I gained 46,000 followers, I think, in the first couple years. And then it took me another 2+ years to get another 4,000 followers. So with shadow banning, and then they suspended my account for 2 hours. And after that, it was unshadow banned, and I got a bunch more followers, got a bunch more exposure. And then there was a day in February, I think it was the day that they had content moderation problems at Instagram. And I had 12,000 new followers in one day. And one image got 35,000 likes and 400,000 views.
That's just a snippet of what would actually happen if they weren't crushing this artwork. That's hilarious.
And I liked the image, but it wasn't my best work. But it went viral because of their content moderation problems on that one day. And so it took me 2.5 years to get 4,000 followers. And one day I got 12,000. So it's a game. I presume I'll lose my account at some point in time. A lot of work gets taken down, but it always gets almost always gets put back on review. In the end, in the terms of the type of work I'm doing, I'm hoping it's not relying on body parts to get across the emotion or story that I'm trying to get across. So it's nice for the work to be seen as it's intended to be seen, but in terms of the message or the story or the emotion, the censorship shouldn't matter in most images. In some it would. But I've been pretty lucky, really, to be able to maintain my account and have it grow. I think Blue Sky has been good, although it seems a little slower these days. Mm-hmm. It's a different type of engagement there. It is a problem in general, as you say, even processing images, or where do you put the work? And I'm not sure if I'm interested in this, but doing a book or exhibiting work at a gallery, or there's problems because it's art nude work.
The fact that you have to post your work and the models have to post their work censored, what do you feel about the view that it serves to draw more attention to those parts of their body, even though you can't see them, and might potentially further sexualize the image just because you've had to censor it, and what people's understanding of censorship is and why it's done?
Yeah. To a certain extent, yes, and to a certain extent, no. I think it's stupid, for one, that you can see men's nipples and not women's nipples. It further reinforces the nudity is bad and sexual in all cases, or most cases. So I think it's just unfortunately, it's something that as an art nude photographer, you have to think about in terms of where you put your work and how it's going to be used. Models that have had the work that I've done of them put on some of those porn type sites, even though it's not porn work. And so that's been very negative for them to even have the connotations of being associated with some of those sites, because they don't feel their work belongs there. There's problems both ways, but the value of the work in most work, even if it's censored, if it's thoughtful work, I think it should come across, even if it's censored. Not that I like it, but still willing to put it up there. So,
yeah. The other thing I wanted to touch on that you mentioned before, the inconsistency in terms of the way that Instagram seems to deal with different users. As this, obviously, from talking to a lot of people, I'm getting the gist and the understanding that this inconsistent pattern it's happening to different people in different ways. And I'm starting to wonder if Instagram intentionally applies different rules to different users, different ways of messing with accounts, adds a bit of confusion into the mix, just so that we're not able to discuss it together and say, here's a pattern that it's following on my account, and here's a pattern it's following your account. And then we can all be like, look at this pattern and we can attack it. Might sound paranoid. It's just that when I'm talking to I've been talking to different models and photographers, and there's a similarity, obviously, in that everyone's having their work censored, but everyone seems to have slightly different experiences. And I'm just wondering if you've got any views on that.
Yeah, I think I've got a backup account and a main account, and whether it's because my main account has a volume of users that my backup account doesn't, but it's definitely a different experience. I'm getting work taken down still pretty regularly. So in the fall, I was getting work taken down every couple of days, like even old work, new work, and I would put it in for review and it would get put back every time. But my backup account wasn't experiencing that at that time. And now that I've kind of been unshadow banned, which I think I'm back shadow banned now 3 months later, but I was getting very little taken down off my main account, but my backup account started getting old images taken down. And again, they're going back up on review. Even there was a trend in the fall on my main account. It didn't matter about the censorship or how much was actually showing in the actual image. If the model was laying down in any way or laying back, there was like a month or two period where that seemed to be targeted. So I think it is, but those weren't targeted on my other accounts. So I think it's different maybe by the weight of accounts or location of accounts or whether you hashtag things but I can't figure it out other than reacting to what's happening at the time. So,
yeah. I mean, maybe there's someone that knows. I mean, I've developed my paranoid theory there, but I'm intrigued to see what's going on. But like you say, I mean, also that this thing is moving in time. And for a period of time, it'll do one thing. And then for a period of time, it'll do something else.
That'd be a good business. If you can figure it out, you'll make a lot of money. It'd be a good side business for you.
Yeah, potentially. I mean, do Instagram even know at this stage? Does any single human being on this earth know?
Yeah, that's a good point.
I have a traditional question that I ask as the final question. It's a little bit more lighthearted. I want you to pick a body part from a list that I've created, and each one corresponds to a question. Those questions have been written by previous guests. Once I ask you the question, I'll then ask you to provide me your own question in your own time, which can be fun or deadly serious for a future guest to answer. So the options you have to choose are eyes, legs, breasts, hands, or hips.
Eyes, I guess.
Okay. If your body could be an art medium like paint, clay, or film, what would it be and why?
Oh, geez. It would be a B movie because it could be a cult classic. It's so bad, but that's what my body would be as an artistic medium. So I gained 50 pounds right around the beginning of COVID. Part of that was being sedentary, and part of it was knee and hip problems. And so I'm still looking to lose that 40 of those 50 pounds. So maybe the next movie will be like a blockbuster. Who knows?
Yeah, I'll keep my fingers crossed. And I mean, I was thinking, before you said cult classic, I was literally going to follow up with it could still be a cult classic, though. It just came straight to my mind. But yeah, I've had a lot of fun researching your work. It's like I said, it's inspired me for years, and I've lost track of the amount of times I've seen something you've posted, paused for like more than 1 second and been like, wow, out loud, which is rare with photographers. So I'm really happy to have been able to speak to you. I mean, saying you're a hobbyist photographer, you're obviously very skilled, and I love your work. So yeah, thank you for creating some of the most beautiful art and new photography I've seen. I'm sure you've inspired many other people besides me to strive and create like you have done.
I really appreciate it, and really appreciate the feedback and the opportunity to chat as well.
Art versus the algorithm. So, which side are you on? You've been listening to Art versus the Algorithm, hosted and produced by Will Preisner, edited by Robbie Mortimer, voiceover by Alexia Kombu, and music by Ned Wolfgang Kelly.